In an effort to appease the Bernie Sanders faction of the Democratic Party, Joe Biden announced his unity platform with Bernie Sanders, which pulls Joe Biden a bit further left than he probably would go normally. Now, I'm not going to say or pretend like he's as far left as the far lefties want, but he is a bit more far left. And recently, Joe Biden has announced his 9-point plan for tackling climate change issues, or his climate agenda. And surprise, surprise, many unions are actually worried because this it would dramatically transform the economy. And like one of the things that Joe Biden announced was like, net zero emission vehicles, which I'm pretty sure means no gas. I'm not going to speculate too much as to what you can expect from a zero emission vehicle. I don't know, maybe hydrogen cell or something. But a lot of people are going to see that and immediately assume it means no more gas. Well, there are a lot of unions that work in the energy sector, and this is scary to them. And Joe Biden definitely needs their support, particularly in swing states like Pennsylvania. The Washington Examiner says Biden's liberal climate change policies feared by unions in Pennsylvania. First, I'd like to point out it's not a liberal climate policy. It is a rather far left climate policy. And again, maybe not as far left as the Bernie people actually want, but certainly further left than most people would assume Joe Biden would go. He's supposed to be the moderate, right? This, I dare say, will backfire on Joe Biden. I really think so. You remember what Hillary Clinton said about ending the coal, these coal jobs or whatever when she was running back in 2015? You see, what they don't realize is that when Biden says these things about the environment, it's not some small dying industry. It's every single job associated with the energy sector getting scared that their livelihood will slowly be eroded. And now, of course, we're seeing many people starting to speak up. But you know why it's not surprising at all to me, outside of the fact that, obviously people would be scared by this? It's because when Ocasio Cortez announced her Green New Deal, unions immediately stood up and said, no, you're going to take away our jobs. So, of course, in this 9-point plan from Joe Biden, he says, no, we're going to create 10 million new clean jobs. But again, they don't seem to understand what they're saying. And this may be one of the biggest trip-ups of the Biden campaign so far. Now, to be fair, I think everybody realizes that people in November are going to vote for or against Trump, and no one really cares about Joe Biden. But I'll tell you this, man, if you scare enough regular people, their hatred won't get them over that hump. A lot of these people might really hate Trump and want to vote against him, but if they're scared of Joe Biden and how he might actually end their jobs, they're going to go and vote for Trump for one simple reason. You can talk about creating jobs, but what you need to understand, Mr. Biden and the Democrats, is that we're telling people is you will be fired and they will get a new job. It doesn't help you. So the individual is going to say, don't take my job away just so you can help somebody else. Creating new jobs doesn't guarantee I get work. So, of course, they need things like federal jobs guarantees. It's part of why AOC, in her Green New Deal, they announced this. Well, many people are saying Joe Biden's attempt at a Green New Deal is basically the same thing. And whether or not that's true is irrelevant, because as I often tell you, messaging is more important. PR is more important. And as it turns out, union workers actually think it's the same thing. So let's talk about what's really going on. What is Joe Biden proposing and how is it going to backfire against him? But I do want to mention one more thing just before we get started. Mike Pence recently gave a speech where he said, when you vote in November, it's not about left or right. It's about whether or not you want America to remain America. And we've got some big news pertaining to the Supreme Court. So all of this ties together. I do believe it's fair to say, come November, you're going to be voting for America as it is, as you like it to be, or something totally different. And we can see it in the proposals from people like Joe Biden and Ocasio Cortez. Before we get started, however, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's many ways you can give, but the best thing you can actually do is, well, I usually don't say this, but subscribe. I know a lot of people watch my videos. Most of them don't actually subscribe. It's actually true that more than half of people who watch are not subscribed. So if you really do think I'm doing a good job, if you want to make sure you get access to my videos, hit that subscribe button. But if you just want to watch and maybe come back whenever, hit the like button if you would be so inclined. Let's read the news. The Examiner says, Biden's liberal climate policies feared by unions in Pennsylvania. Jim Cassidy, business manager of the Insulators Local 2 Union, just outside Pittsburgh, knows Joe Biden as a friend of labor. He keeps a photo of himself with Biden in his office from when the former vice president visited Aliquippa, Pennsylvania in 2018 to campaign for then U.S. candidate Conor Lamb, a centrist Democrat. It's a visual reminder of Biden's longtime support for unionized workers who build things. But Cassidy, 55, is torn over whether Biden, the Democratic presidential nominee, would be an enemy of the fossil fuel industry whose workers he represents. Workers who install insulation material on piping and boilers in natural gas plants. Let me stop there and tell you exactly what I've been saying. You can come out and say no more coal, no more fossil fuels, but you don't get it, do you? What you're really saying is every single job down that line, you're gone. Somebody who installs insulation, you're not going to have a job when there's no fossil fuels. Therein lies the big conundrum for the Democrats. And here's the quote. Joe Biden is really one of us. I always loved the man, said Cassidy, a registered Democrat. He scares me now. Is he embracing the new Green Deal or whatever they're calling it? He needs to get some stuff straight. Cassidy said he will vote for Biden, trusting Biden will come around to recognize how the natural gas fracking boom over the past decade has been a godsend in western and northeastern Pennsylvania, replacing the fading coal and steel industries. But Cassidy's concerns are shared by leaders of other building trade unions based in these closely watched regions of Pennsylvania, a key swing state. Quote, I am completely shocked and stunned about the language coming from Joe Biden, allegedly a union guy, said Jim Snell, business agent for Steam Fitters Local 420 in southeastern Pennsylvania, whose 4,600 members install piping systems in oil refineries, natural gas plants, and infrastructure projects. The Democratic Party has kicked the building trades to the curb, and they are all in with the environmental groups. And there it is. Yeah, people are realizing it's going to negatively impact their jobs. Now, listen, I can respect when people say we want sound environmental policy. I love nature. I love going for hikes, all that good stuff. I'm an environmentalist to varying degrees. I wouldn't consider myself to be as, far left as many of these other activists who go out and dedicate themselves to it. But I did work for some of the biggest environmental nonprofits in the world because I do believe we must protect this planet. I do. I also recognize that there are sound ways to slowly transition, to do it in a way that won't hurt people's livelihoods and their lives and scare them and shock them. So what you need to understand is, listen, we are all in this together. It's one planet. We got to work together. Now, that includes this guy, Jim Snell. His life matters the same as mine does. And I got to make sure that when we come to a new conclusion that the environment needs protecting, we don't just take people and say, except for you, you get kicked out into the cold. That's not okay. So let's figure out the appropriate way to deal with these transitions, not the way that Joe Biden is talking about it. Unfortunately, he's going too radical because he's trying to pander to the far left. The Examiner says Biden moves far left. In a series of conversations with the Washington Examiner over recent weeks, the union officials, all registered Democrats, expressed alarm at Biden's shift to the left on energy policy, while giving him some benefit of the doubt that they would not grant to more liberal candidates such as Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, who pledged to ban fracking during the campaign. Biden has promised to end new fracking leases on federal lands, where only 13% of natural gas was produced in 2017. But he has struggled to overcome the gaffe during a pointed exchange with Sanders in a March debate, in which Biden declared no new fracking. With Biden, there is some level of thought that he is saying certain things because it's a line you need to walk at this point to get elected. There are folks giving him that leeway, said Jeff Nobers, executive director of the Builders Guild of Western Pennsylvania, representing 60,000 workers and contractors in construction trades. Biden, seeking to energize young and liberal voters, is doubling down on an agenda to build a clean energy economy of the future that transitions away from fossil fuels, viewing the recovery from the coronavirus pandemic as an opportunity to respond to climate change. I got a message. I'm sorry. I got to stop. To these union guys, hear me out. Do you really think that once Joe Biden gets elected, he will turn around and go back to supporting you? Now, I guess the idea is that Bernie Sanders is far left. And so he means it when he says he's going to shut all this down. But Joe Biden is just saying it so he can get elected. Is that really what you think? If that were true, wouldn't he just be promising you sweet nothings to get elected? If he's not going to hold his promise to other people, why would he hold it to you? The only assumption you can make is he means it when he says it. Otherwise, you're saying straight up you want to vote for a liar. I mean, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what you really think. I think there are many people who support Trump who would feel similarly, like they trust him. You trust Biden to do the right thing. I'm sorry, I don't. I think actions speak louder than words. And the only actions I can see from Joe Biden is that he's absolutely catering to the far left. Why would I assume he would change his tune after getting elected? I bring you now to the 9 key elements of Joe Biden's plan for a clean energy revolution. We can go quickly through this, but first, he wants to take executive action on day one, not just to reverse all the damage Trump has done, but go further. He even mentions this. Check this out. Developing rigorous new fuel economy standards aimed at ensuring 100% of new sales for light and medium duty vehicles will be zero emissions. Protecting America's natural treasures by permanently protecting the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and so on and so forth. My bigger focus here is on the jobs and how unions will feel about it. I don't know if there's a certain way he's planning on getting to zero emissions for light and medium duty vehicles, but I imagine that means what, like electric or something. But even electric still have a carbon footprint, so sounds like electricity, sure, fine. He goes on to talk about a bunch of issues, but he does, to be fair, bring up create 10 million good-paying middle-class union jobs. This is his attempt to placate the unions that are scared. He says every federal dollar spent on rebuilding our infrastructure during the Biden administration will be used to prevent, reduce, and withstand the impacts of this climate crisis. American workers should build American infrastructure and manufacture all the materials that go into it. And all of these workers must have the option to join a union and collectively bargain. Biden will ensure his infrastructure legislation incorporates labor provisions so federal investments create millions of middle-class jobs, benefiting workers across industries. Now, I know that sounds good, and I could be wrong about this, but to me, it sounds like you, sir, in the energy sector, will lose your job. Why? Well, we got to have zero-emission cars, bro. That's the way we're going to do it. We're going to shut down fracking in certain areas, like Joe Biden said. It was a gaffe, they say, when he said no new fracking, but I'm sorry, we're going to shut down your industry. Now, don't worry. You may be out of a job, but we're going to have fresh new jobs over there for other people. So while you may no longer have work, other people will. I don't see that's supposed to help or make people feel safe when their job is taken away. Telling someone you're going to take their job and create a job, I think is still a net detriment. Trump's not saying that. Trump's straight up like, we're going to make everything work for you. And he has. The economy was great before COVID. So it looks like, as I've stated, in his attempts to play this game, it backfires much the same way it did against AOC. Check out the story from June of last year. The Green New Deal is fracturing a critical base for Democrats. Unions. I'm sorry. I think it's obvious. This story from Reason says Biden's new Green Deal is the same as the old Green New Deal. New Green New Deal. I love that. It's uncanny how solving climate change just happens to require the progressives' long-standing economic agenda. Reason writes, although he doesn't call it that, Joe Biden, the presumptive 2020 presidential nominee of the Democratic Party, rolled out his version of the Green New Deal during a Tuesday speech on how his administration would handle man-made climate change. The Take the Green New Deal resolution introduced by AOC. While somewhat vaguely aspirational, this aims to commit the U.S. to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, to creating millions of unionized jobs, to investing much more in clean infrastructure and industry, to hugely expanding public transit and high-speed rail, and to greatly increasing federal support for research and development in no-carbon energy generation. In June 2019, AOC estimated it would cost $10 trillion. They go. So I'm going to skip ahead of this. They say, in his climate speech this week, Biden declared that we have 9 years before the damage is irreversible. This dire forecast seems to be an update of AOC's claim that we've got 12 years to turn it around. Both politicians are misrepresenting the findings of a 2018 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which concluded that humanity could cut global carbon dioxide emissions by 40 to 50% by 2030 to have a good chance of limiting future average warming to below 1.5 degrees Celsius. I'm not going to read too much into this because I think they've made their point very clear that it's very much so the same plan. Very much so the same plan. And as Fox Business puts it, Biden's climate plan is a disaster for American workers. The best way to recover from the economic slowdown is to allow American businesses freedom and flexibility. And I got to say, I agree with that. You look, we do have a challenge between balancing the health of our environment and our economy. It's something that comes up. You'll often hear conservatives say, we can't sacrifice the economy because of these reports and things like that. But the conversation is more nuanced than the left or the right would put it for each other. However, I got to say, very simply, one of the biggest challenges we face as a country is the loss of our manufacturing base. Many of our jobs that once existed in small towns went off to China and other countries. for several reasons. For one, free trade agreements. You could put a factory in China, make the product, and bring it right back to the U.S. with no tariffs. This made a lot of sense to businesses then when economic when environmental regulations came into place. Let's say you produce skateboards and you have a certain amount of carbon emissions that you produce for some reason. I don't know, whatever. Cars. Well, if they say you can only produce a certain amount of carbon and China says we don't care, well, then it's simple. Move your factory over to China, import everything because, well, why not? There's no tariffs or anything. I think then it becomes very clear what Trump has been doing with environmental policy and with putting these tariffs, on imported goods, particularly from China. Trump's trying to bring these jobs back to the United States. Well, I'm sorry, man, whatever the intention is, because I love some good environmental policy. I love protecting the environment. Clean air, man. Do we want to breathe in nasty? No. We want to breathe in good air. But there is a big problem. If you start implementing these harder rules, and there are countries that don't have these rules, you incentivize companies to leave. Well, there's one simple answer. The reality is we can have well thought out climate policy and perhaps no free trade. I don't know, exactly how you would do it, but we want to make sure we incentivize companies to work here in the US, and we want to make sure they do it clean. You can't just say, you can't produce X amount of emissions. It's not a solution. Then you just lose the factory outright and you're hurting the workers. You can't just say no emissions because then people just start pumping out pollutants like crazy. You got to do it in a sound and balanced way. And unfortunately, it seems like we're not really going to get that. Now, to be fair, I don't think Trump is trying to overtly destroy the environment. I think he's trying to find that balance. But Joe Biden is embracing a far left, more radical plan than Trump is. So what is a regular person supposed to do? You've got the short-term thinking, which in my opinion is really, really great for us to survive today. We need it. You've got potential long-term thinking. If we don't protect our environment, we're going to get sick and it's going to be bad for everybody. So where do you find the balance? Unfortunately, when given the choice, it looks like Joe Biden it's too far in one direction. You're not getting a reasoned and balanced choice with this Green New Deal. And I know, this being the internet, you're going to see a bunch of far lefties ragging on me saying, oh, Tim's wrong. He's claiming Joe Biden is far left, blah, blah, blah. Well, he's far left compared to where Trump is. And Trump isn't that far left relative to where America's always been, at least for the past several decades. Track any of the data. This unity plan with Bernie Sanders pulls Joe Biden far left. They don't want to accept it because there's no line for them, right? If you look at the New York Times' data on the Democratic Party manifesto versus the Republicans, Barack Obama did pull the Democratic Party far left. And now with Joe Biden moving even further left, Joe Biden is embracing far left policy in an effort to pander to the far left who probably doesn't want to vote for him anyway. So it seems like all he's going to do is ostracize both groups. I'm sorry, man. If you've got a right wing, a moderate wing, and a left wing, and the left is super far left, then Trump has that better bet. But listen, if you're a Trump voter, this is not a guarantee. As we've already heard, these union guys are straight up saying, they'll give him the benefit of the doubt. They'll vote for Biden. That to me is shocking considering Biden's sordid history. They've called him corrupt for years. And all of a sudden now that he's running against Trump, they say he's not corrupt. You know what? I'm not going to vote for Sleepy Joe. I think he's ineffective, well past his prime, and incapable of handling one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. That doesn't say a whole lot for Trump, to be honest, but it does say that Trump's got more going for him than Biden does. But I'll tell you what, we'll throw it to Mr. Vice President Mike Pence. He warns, the 2020 election is about whether America remains America. Joe Biden would set America on a path of socialism and decline. I don't necessarily agree that Joe Biden would set us on a path of socialism and decline, but I do technically agree. The issue is not what Joe Biden believes. It's that Joe Biden is weak and he would be walked all over. They just push him to the side and come in and say, house is ours. It's like the old guy opens the door, kids knock on the door and he has no idea what's going on. Hey, yo, kids, come on in. And then they start partying while he falls asleep and they use his pad. That's what it's going to be. And that's probably why many far left people do like Biden. So while I certainly don't agree with Mike Pence's worldview and a lot of his politics, I at least view it as part of what America's been. And while I do think progress is a good thing, like real progress, and I would like to see a little bit of a moderate leftward push Admittedly, Trump is fairly moderate, but I lean a little bit more left. I'm an left-leaning independent voter. That's actually what Pew calls me. I think the far left is way too far left. So the only real option I can see is, for a regular American, Trump. That's true. That doesn't mean that Trump is he's who you should vote for. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying necessarily that I'm guaranteed to vote for him. I will give this one shout out, though, for people who want to know. Trump trying to remove our troops from the Middle East is the most important thing, in my opinion, for me, not for everybody. I don't think you're going to be able to argue that away from me. The left can come to me all day and night and say you shouldn't vote for Trump for these reasons, and I'm going to be like, getting our troops out of the Middle East. And I didn't even ask him to do it. He just started doing it, and I'm like, I kind of agree with that. You know what I mean? Well, I really agree with that. But whether or not that gets me over the hurdle to vote for Trump, we'll see. I'm leaning in favor of voting for Trump as it stands right now, for reasons I've stated. I'm not going to give Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt. I think he's going to go nuts. And I think he's going to burn everything down because he's desperate to win. But there is one other issue. Right now, we have some shocking and worrisome news. With the utmost respect to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who has lived a storied and very successful and legendary life. She's undergoing chemotherapy due to liver cancer. So 100% hoping for the best. Ruth Bader Ginsburg is without a doubt one of the strongest human beings I have ever heard of. First of all, she's 87, but she's undergone now the 5th cancer treatment. Much respect. Look, I can have my disagreements with people, and I hope you can too. And I hope within those disagreements you recognize we're all Americans and this is how it's supposed to be. Kind of. I mean, not necessarily. But what I mean is I disagree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg on some of her rulings, but I have tremendous respect for the life she's lived and how she's worked within the U.S. system to accomplish her goals. Tremendous respect. Breaking barriers, proving that in America you can succeed with hard work and dedication. And now, 5 rounds, a 5th battle with cancer, and she's still working. Tremendous respect. But let's be real. Whoever gets elected next is going to change the game. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, again, with all due respect, is coming to the point where she will either have to retire or, for the obvious reason, she will no longer be on the Supreme Court. Not just that, though. We're also hearing rumors that Justice Alito may retire. Now, Alito, my understanding is more conservative. And Ginsburg is obviously more of the liberal side of the court. I hate using that word liberal. But this means we're potentially looking at 3 seats opening up in the next year, couple years. Whoever wins this is going to change the game. Now you can argue Joe Biden is going to win, and it doesn't matter because the Republicans can come back. They can strike back and they can win again in 2022 and then 2024 with the presidency. Nah, they're probably going to get 3 Supreme Court seats. Now, you might argue the same for Trump. The Democrats might say, well, you know what? If Trump might win this one and the Republicans could take the House and the Senate, but at least we'll come back in 2024, they're going to get 3 seats. Because it's not just about Alito, Ginsburg. It's also about Stephen Breyer, who's 81. Now, I haven't heard anything necessarily about his potential retirement, but listen, let's just be real, man. John Roberts, I would estimate he's probably going to be in for a little bit. Why? He's 65, okay? Average life expectancy, age of retirement. He'll probably be in for another decade plus. Clarence Thomas, 72. I imagine he's got another decade or so before potential retirement. But a lot of these justices are getting on in years, man. Ginsburg, obviously 87 and 5 rounds of 5 battles with cancer. Wow, man. Everybody knows that it's only a matter of time. Stephen Breyer is 81. I believe he's past the average life expectancy for an American male. Samuel Alito is 70, but he's eyeing retirement. Sonia Sotomayor, she's 66, she'll be in. Elena Kagan, she'll be in. Neil Gorsuch and Kavanaugh are both in their 50s. They're going to be in for quite some time. So it looks like there's potentially 3 seats. That's why this election is more important than ever. And that's why it scares me when people just say they're going to believe whatever Biden says. You don't want to elect a liar and a deceiver who will just manipulate people for power, who will then appoint people who just want power. The same is true for Donald Trump. I'm not telling you that Joe Biden is better or worse. I'm not saying that. Personally, I think Joe Biden is way worse, but I'm not trying to tell you what you should think. I'm just saying, if Joe Biden's plan is to come out and embrace the far left, and then you're hoping he's going to turn around, you got another thing coming, man. That's not going to happen. Joe Biden knows who butters his bread. He knows who he's got to support if he wants to win, and he's going for it. And he's got to win a re-election. What do you think that means for his first 4 years? Yeah, he's going to tell you, bye-bye fracking. I want to win again. I got other policy plans. I want to appoint more Supreme Court justices. So bye-bye fracking, bye-bye energy sector. If you're an environmentalist, you're probably thinking something similar to Trump. But this is the real battle, the Supreme Court. Now, Trump and the Republicans have just plastered the federal court system with judges. Not Supreme. There's more than just the Supreme Court, but this will be a major cultural battle. Whoever wins that presidency, man, if it's Biden, Supreme Court goes the other way. So I'll tell you this to the union guys. If Joe Biden's embracing this stuff now, what do you think's going to happen when he appoints 3 more lefty judges to the Supreme Court? Do you think your industry will survive? I'd imagine it wouldn't. To the environmentalists, they're probably cheering for it, and they'll probably vote for Biden. So keep that all in mind. But I will wrap things up there. Stick around. The next segment is coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews. That'll be at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.